All right, welcome to meeting number 3 for our specially designed instruction book study. I'm really excited to be here with you today. And today we're going to be talking about planning. And I hope that you've had time to read this section because there was so much packed in there that there's no way we can cover all of it. So I do want to just bring your attention to just take a look at what is coming up. Our next meeting is just going to be next week on the 18th. And so it comes up pretty quickly. And then we will have 2 makeup meetings, and they're going to be the same content, same kind of thing. If you have special questions about something that you missed, you can go ahead and ask it during those times. But the content's pretty much going to be the same for both of those. You do not need to attend both of those makeup meetings. And I did that just because I had to reschedule with my daughter having her baby. And so I didn't want to make it to where you guys couldn't get your PTSB credit or STARS credit. And so if you have further questions about that, email me separately. Talking about PTSB and STARS credit, the way that you're able to get credit is you needed to attend 4 hours of live session. And so the 2 makeup sessions will give you an extra opportunity to do that. And then the rest of the time was on your honor system that you actually read the book. And so please make sure that you do have that completed by the end of our last session, or by that makeup session, so that there will be a form that you'll fill out, and you will need to click the box that says it's on your honor system that you did indeed read the book and complete the 4 live sessions to get the credit. There's no requirement to take the book study and to get the credit. You can definitely take it just for your own learning and improvement. So no reason for that. Okay.
Hey, Dina, there's a question. Will the makeup sessions be at the same time as well?
Yeah, 4 to 5 o'clock.
Okay.
And you should have received in your emails that were sent out, you should have received those links already in that little chart. I'll be sending that out again. So if you did not receive that, let me know. I know some districts, when I send it in like a large grouping, some districts have like a bigger firewall than others, and sometimes it does not allow you to get the emails that way. So if you did not receive that, please get with me right away, because I'll have to send that to you separately, okay? If you don't have some paper or pen, a paper and pen, something to take notes on, if you'll grab that really quickly, there's going to be a few times where we're going to stop and pause, and I'd love for you to be able to take notes. The other thing that I'm hoping that you have is access to an IEP. If you could if you have that and you have it handy, go ahead and make sure you have that ready, because I do want you to refer to your IEP that you chose for this week as we go through this. All right, I love this quote because, thinking about planning in this whole section, the quote says, excuse me, to reach a destination, you need to know exactly where you're headed, plan the best route to get there, and monitor your progress along the way. When we look at these 2 images, what are the main differences that you see? You can put that, and I meant to tell you, in a webinar, you can't use the chat, but you can put any comments that you'd like in the Q&A. It doesn't have to just be for questions. So if you have some of those, would you please participate in the Q&A? So what do you see as the main differences here?
One has lots of paths and one is direct.
Yeah.
Multiple pathways on the left one. The one on the left has many paths, while the one on the right is one path, lots of road opportunities.
Yeah. One of the things that I noticed.
Also,
Oh, go ahead.
oh, I just wanted to read a few more. Many paths versus one, multiple pathways. One pathway versus many. One has a lot of alternate paths, whereas the other is just a singular path. The bridge provides more access to people. One is forested, somebody said, calm, and the other is chaotic. One is windy, I think is how they meant that. The other is straight.
Yeah. We see lots of differences here. And we see, one of the things that I noticed is it really clear, the one on the left, is it really clear which path we should take? Versus the one on the right, where it's pretty direct, it's pretty clear. Someone mentioned that there's a little more access, for if someone needed some sort of stability. So we're guided more on the right? And it's clear where we're headed. And so I think that, this can say a lot about when we are getting ready to plan our specially designed instruction. Is it clear? Are we looking, our students on the left wondering where in the world we're headed, or are they on the right and feeling supported? And I love this quote from Benjamin Franklin. If you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. And I have found this true, not just in teaching, but literally in all aspects of life. I think it's so true. We need to make sure that we are taking time to make a plan. I just want to go over this visual that we had from our last meeting. We were reminded that SDI is our main role as special educators, and that we actually work in the gap between where the student is currently performing and the grade level standards. But my question is, are we ensuring that our instruction is individualized and that our instruction supports the skill gaps or deficits that our kids need? Are we looking at that? The other thing, just to remind you, this little cute girl here is reminding us that we need to make sure that we are looking at the individual needs of each one of our kiddos. So again, as we take a look at some of our IEPs, I want you to take just a moment, if you have an IEP handy, and I want you to just take a look at the SDI that you have planned in that IEP and ask yourself, is what I have planned, is it special? And then what IEP goals am I actually working on within the lesson or activities that I have coming up? So for tomorrow's lesson, whatever you have planned, whether you're in a co-taught classroom, whether you're in a resource room setting only, what are we doing to make sure that our planning is special for SDI? What are we doing to make it special? If you have your books handy, I know that some of you are in a big group setting, but hopefully you all have your books handy with you. Turn to page 52 and take a look at the steps that Anne has for us here. I think that, many times, I know that when I was planning SDI, I don't know that I really thought through all of these different parts to really make sure, that it was ready to go on all of these levels. And yet sometimes it's just seamless, right? We just kind of do this automatically. But when we break down these steps, I think it really helps us to have a focus and make sure that we're not missing anything. When we look at learning targets, and many times in our general education classrooms, we do, we'll find a learning target usually posted on the board. But are they in our special education classrooms? Do our students know in there where we're headed? I will say it's definitely important for the educator to know the expectation, but can students tell what they're supposed to know by the end of the lesson? I know, and I've even know whether we've been doing observation, and I know when administrators have walked through different parts of buildings and they see things posted and they go and ask the kiddos, well, what are you learning today? Many times the kiddo can recite what's on the board, but they don't really know what that means. And so, are we making sure that our targets are clear? Are we making sure that they have a clear understanding of not just what they're doing for that day or for that moment, but why and what is that going to help them do, and to build upon their skills? Um, and how can we ensure that our students understand what we're expecting of them? How can we do that? So as we go through some of these things, some of these steps, I'd like for you to just take a note of maybe some areas that you think, you know what, I'm really good at doing this part, but I might need to beef this part up a little bit. Moore, Garst, and Marzano suggest 3 different categories of learning targets. One is foundational, and these, of course, reflect any of those missing skills, lack of prior knowledge, or incomplete processes. The second one is learning goals, which are grade level expectations. And the third one is cognitively complex targets, or those learning goals. And these targets help to extend learning, those cognitively complex targets. So for those kiddos who might need a little more expanding, that's what we're looking at there. But I really want you to keep in mind that some students might need foundational skills and foundational skill targets, and they might need cognitively complex targets. Sometimes they may have an area in one area that they need help with that may need foundational help, but then the other, they need more of just extension. So I love this part too, just a good reminder from Anne from the book to keep in mind that 1 or 2 targets will bring about focus, but 3 or more will blur their view. And I think this is, we find this to be definitely true, right? We put on too many expectations of them and they get overwhelmed and it becomes very blurry to them. This next part, pinpointing the difficult moments students may experience. So again, students may know what to do, but do they know how? Of course, we want to take a strength-based approach, but identifying what the challenges might be can help to lighten or remove frustration and behaviors for both the student and the educator. If somebody's visually impaired and learning to navigate mobility, we wouldn't dream of leaving chairs out in the way to block a walkway. So let's make sure we're removing those known barriers and help to set them up for success. I think it's really important too is, whether we're in the classroom co-teaching or we are co-planning, with our gen ed teachers, when we take a look at this, we need to say, where are those areas that it was difficult in the lesson previously, or take a look at your skill sets of your kiddos and see what areas do you know your kids best. What areas do you know that they're going to already start struggling in this lesson, right? We know a lot of times if we just take time to stop and look through it, and there were wonderful examples that Anne had in the book of the co-teaching process that was going on. And there were, different ways that they started looking and outlining and saying, I know that they're going to struggle here, so I'm going to go ahead and take that out of the mix and go ahead and set them up for success. So what, for tomorrow's lesson, what areas do you already know that you're going to have to remove those barriers for some of your children? When we take a look at skill acquisition deficits and performance deficits, what do these really mean? And where do your students lie? As we look over here, we can see students' acquisition deficits is that the student does not possess the skill, so they can't successfully perform that skill, right? They do not have the ability to perform that skill yet, right? Performance deficits is they actually possess the skill, but they're just not performing, right? So where do your students lie in this? And sometimes they're all over the place, right? In different areas. And why is it important to know the difference between these two? I want to pause just for a moment and have you think about that part. Why is it important that we not only understand, but we remember and recognize the difference between these two for each one of our kids? And go ahead and pop your comments into the Q&A. In my experience, this can definitely change, honestly, from not only one student to the next, but one skill area to the next, right? All right, let's take a look. It says, yeah, the student needs instruction on the skills while the student refuses to implement the skill. We need to be making sure we're giving instruction on all of those different things. You are correct. Yeah. Thank you, guys. Skill acquisition deficit, working on prerequisite skills, performance deficits, working on executive function, which we're going to get into a little later here. Yeah, I think it helps. Betty, you mentioned that it helps us to know how we need to plan for instruction. That is really what I hope that you'll take a pause. Sometimes, we talk about skill versus will. This is exactly what we're talking about in these areas. And yet, sometimes just because they possess it, one day little Johnny may be able to walk in directly and sit down and just go right to work. And then tomorrow he may not be able to. But are we taking the time to, again, have that relationship with our students and to know why? Why is that happening, right? And so I think if we pause and we remember these things, that it may not always be, he may know how to do 2-digit multiplication, and yet tomorrow, because of some trauma that happened in his life, he's just not able to do anything. So I think we have to remember that it may not always be just because they know how to do it that they're just going to do it all the time. By determining our student needs and asking the right questions, we're going to be able to prioritize and focus on the most appropriate SDI. And like I said, sometimes that's going to change from day to day. All right, so number 3, choosing those IEP goals to address during the lesson. We're always, as special educators, we are looking at how can we closely align our whatever we're doing for instruction and making sure that those skill gaps are addressed, right? What goals are we looking at in each one of those lessons? Are we looking at that? Are there any students with similar goals that, when we're grouping them and where we have them in our resource room or even in the classroom, how can we make sure that we are addressing those goals? And so, because a lot of times when we find ourselves helping to just complete work, from the gen ed classroom, or we might just be, trying to fix, and help with behaviors. And yet our goal is to make sure that we are addressing our SDI is focused on those goals. That's really our number one, right? And so thank you, Julie. I see that she put in there, I'm a gen ed teacher and I work with the ECSE every day. Thank you. We appreciate that. It definitely works best when we are working together, right? we are able to do that, because that's when we can get the most success. I really love this. Progress lies not just in supporting what is, but in advancing towards what will be. As we look at this, I want you to just think about, like, when we clarify the target for the lesson and we look at those difficult things, how can we make sure that we're, looking ahead? And of course, that's in that, not just co-teaching, but co-planning, right? Making sure that we are not just sitting in there as some sort of just another body in the room, but that we're actually helping to progress the learning of each one of our students. I want to take just a moment. Can you guys turn to page 77? This is that metacognition self-assessment. And I want to take just a minute and have you take a look at that. I know that, like I said, we don't have time to really go through and read together, but there's a few parts in here that I want to just point out. I think it's really important that we do get kind of a gauge on where we are in our own metacognition. So I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes, turn to page 77 and take a look at that list. All right. I know that we don't have time for everybody to just take the quiz if you hadn't already done it, but hopefully you'll go back and take a look at this. Metacognition is just simply thinking about one's own thinking, right? And so and this is not just about our planning SDI, but in life in general. So when we take a look at these questions, take this quiz from that kind of perspective. I really love when I take a look, and I'm putting this into an alignment with SDI and planning SDI. Some of the ones that stood out to me, the first one that stood out to me was number 17. And it is, I view the issue from someone else's perspective. How many times do we pause when we are creating our SDI? How many times do we actually pause and think about what our students might be seeing, what our students might be feeling? Are we looking at it from their eyes? And, I want you to think about lately, has there been something new that you had to learn in order to perform the task, either recently or in the past? Something new that you've had to learn that you were not familiar with, of course, right? So I want you to just think about that. Anne mentions the importance of teaching students the process for creating different learning styles, maybe mnemonics, right? And here's just a quick example. I know you have tons that you could come up with. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. I still remember these, right? We learned the planets this way. But do we stop and teach them the process of coming up with their own mnemonics so that it has even deeper meaning for them? They had a cute example in there of the students were having a hard time remembering, bringing things, and they came up with that BLT strategy. And so go back, if you didn't see that, go back and look in the book. She had a lot of really cute, different things that could come up with that. It's research has proven that our brains really do remember much better when we can come up with these kind of strategies. Music helps, right? There's tons of different things. I want to just take a second. I know I'm dating myself, but I just want to ask, maybe just with a thumbs up, how many of you have ever driven a manual or stick shift before? Wow, there's a lot more thumbs up than I realized. Good job. You know, there's definitely them, and maybe like especially like my kids and some of my grandkids ages, there's so many that would have no idea how to, if they were able to get into a car and there was a stick shift, I don't think they'd be able to drive it off, right? Like there's just no way. Um, but I want you to think about just really quickly. So, since so many of you have had the opportunity to learn how to drive a stick shift, I want you to think about what are the important steps that you would need to know in learning how to drive a stick? And do those steps require you to complete them in some sort of special order? I just want you to recall your own feelings the first time you attempted to drive a stick shift. Was somebody with you to guide you? Like, what are those things? So, just in kind of Googling some things here, these are like, I thought it was kind of funny. You can see some of these steps, right? So if you had never driven a stick shift before and I were to hand you these steps and say, okay, there you go. See you later. I'll see you back at home. Do you think you would struggle? I think, I came to realize really quickly that reading instructions and knowing how to manage that gas and clutch and getting that feeling, right? Knowing when to shift is entirely something different. I remember I was, turning 16. My daddy and I grew up in Georgia, and my daddy and I had been looking all over for a car. And of course, during that time, um, Camaros and Mustangs and all that were, that was kind of, all those things were really big, just like they are now, but they were big then too. And I just remember we had test drove all these and I was so excited thinking I was going to get one of these kind of cars. And my daddy called me one day and said, "Hey, I really think I found your car. I'm going to come get you and we're going to go down to the dealership." I said, "I'm so excited." Get down there. He picks me up he always drove this big cruiser motorcycle. And so we get down to the dealership and I go up. I don't know if any of you even know what this is, but it was a Dodge Colt. It was a little hatchback car. And I thought, oh, okay, after looking at Mustangs and Camaros and all these things, like that was not my vision of like what I thought he was gonna have sitting there. Um, but it was brand new. He could get me this brand new little Dodge Colt that got better gas mileage and, brand new for a lot cheaper than what we were going to spend. So anyway, I get in, I'm all excited actually that I'm like, oh my gosh, well, hey, I have a car and it's new and it was cute. It was a stick. I'd never even touched a stick in my life. And I said, "Well, I don't know how to drive this." And he was like, "Well, I'll teach you in the parking lot right here." And so we had a few lessons in the parking lot of the dealership. And then he says to me, "Okay, you're doing great. I'll see you at home," and left. And so not only, I mean, he did give me some instruction. I got some instruction. I got some modeling. He modeled, and then he let me practice alongside him, and then gave me that true independent, like I'll see you at home, getting through red lights and hills and all that. It was really fun, let me just tell you. Not. And by the time I got home, I was so upset, and I pull into the driveway. He was waiting for me, and he got in the passenger side, and he's like, "Oh, you're not done." He said, "Let's go." In our neighborhood, we had around the block, we had this big steep hill, and he had me go and park, like go up and pull into the middle of that hill and turn the car off. And he said to me, I know when you can get up this hill without killing the car and rolling backward, I won't have to worry about you anymore. Well, let me just tell you, it took a while and a lot of tears, but I finally got the feeling of that gas and clutch and how to do it. And I can honestly tell you, I never rolled. Anytime I ever have driven a stick, I can literally just sit with the gas and clutch and I never roll. So, the moral of this story is it's not always enough to give the instructions and just model for someone. They need to be able to practice those newly learned skills in multiple settings, right? In order to be independent and successful. If he had just let me practice on like a flat surface, I would not have ever known that I needed to make sure that I wouldn't roll on those hills, right? And so, but I do want to point out I'm not telling you to do that and then just leave your students. I'm just saying there's a fine line as we balance when and how long to let them struggle through the learning process and when to step in and offer supports, right? My daddy knew my limits. He knew that just the right moment to step in before I gave up. And so I just want to remind you to get to know your students and, make sure that we're not leaving them struggling in the process too long, but know when to step in, but also let them go through that learning process, right? And so here's just a good reminder that just, doesn't really mean just because we give them those instructions that they can just do it. There's an abundance of research that proves adults and children can improve the metacognition through observation awareness and training and strategies. No matter what your self-assessment score, a growth mindset is warranted. And so as you go back and you look at that self-evaluation again, just think about those things. What do you do when you're trying to go through those lessons? What would you do if you were learning this for the first time? I mean, all of us had to learn and go through some of these things. And just because, one of those other ones is talking about, looking at, are there other options, not just my way? I remember when I first walked into a math class, when I first started teaching, and they were doing a whole different math system, teaching them how to multiply. And I thought, well, my goodness, why don't you just do it this way? And yet I noticed something. I sat back and just observed for a while and realized that many of those students with disabilities, it was easier for them to do it this other way and not my way. And so make sure that we're being flexible in our own metacognitive processes. Okay, so adapting the general approach. Again, how might we incorporate pre-teaching, visual and kinesthetic input, small group instruction, explicit directions, right? Chunking, all of those different things. What is our approach? And then, because I promise you, there's going to be multiple answers to this question. I can't just ask that and have you all tell me one way, because it's going to be different for every child, every lesson, right? There are those guiding questions on page 85 and 86. So if you haven't marked that in your book, to go back and look at that. In fact, I'll have you, what time is it? What time do we have here? We have just a second if you want to turn to some of that. On page 85 and 86, there are some guiding questions there. But one of the ones I want to bring to your attention is, remember, is it a tool or an accommodation, or is it SDI? Now, remember, we already mentioned before, we can definitely design SDI around an accommodation, right? And we should. Many times we give these, these graphic organizers, we give all these wonderful accommodations, but we haven't given SDI about those types of things, right? And so make sure that, number one, make sure that is it just an accommodation? Because if we're just giving those, that's not SDI. Okay. And then is it intentional? And is it designed to be transferable and generalizable? I think many times, we can come up with some things that are in the moment, but are we doing it? Are we planning it to where they can use this skill, not just in that setting, but other settings, right? One of the other things that Ms. Binninghoff suggests, that these 9 HLPs or high leverage practices help to support in planning our SDI. And this chart is on 87 and 88. So if you're already there on 85 and 86, just turn over and you'll see here, this offers ideas on how to also include the federal mandate to use peer-reviewed research while delivering instruction. So I just want to take a moment and have you look at these. I know that you're already using high leverage practices in your instruction, but which ones do you currently use to support SDI? And then also, which areas do you intend to focus on more? Are there ones that you don't feel as comfortable doing? And so, take a look at those as you go back through that and see, are there areas that you feel that, either you consistently use or ones that you might need a little more support doing yourself. And these are not like we said, these are not all of them, but these are the 9 that Ms. Binninghoff suggests definitely support planning SDI. All right, on page 93 through 95, she gives a really beautiful example of how an educator might adapt for students on alternate standards. And while they're working on adding, this student is working on adding single digits using touchpoint math while attending a high school algebra class. I thought this was beautiful because how many times do we hear, oh, there's no way that student could go to algebra class, right? And yet there were goals that this student could definitely work on during this algebra class, right? And so what experience do you have or can you envision with providing SDI to those students on alternate standards in a general ed setting? And then what ideas can you take from those found in the book as you plan forward? Because I hope you've had a chance to read that section. If you haven't, again, you're going to look there. But this quote here, I think I hope that you'll come away with this, not just for those on alternate standards, but all your students, is look at the lesson for all that it offers, not just its traditionally intended purpose. And if we start looking at, when we look at algebra, there's a lot that students of all skill levels can get something from, right? Look at geometry. There's so many different ways that we can adapt and make sure that all of our students are getting something from each one of those lessons. Okay, number 6, attend to necessary access or executive function skills. So when we look at that, these are big buzzwords. When we look at access, we look at executive function. I really want you to start thinking about, especially that student's IEP that you pulled, if you did, or just think about your caseload or some of your students in your classrooms. I want you to think about, when we think about those access needs and executive functioning needs, what kind of things do we already know can help them to be successful? What kind of things needs to be put in place to help them be more independent? So let's take a look. On pages 99 and 100, it mentions skills that students need in order to access not only curriculum, but life situations. So are we providing the necessary instruction and offering the appropriate supports to ensure access to that curriculum? Are there areas of those access or executive functioning skills that you need to add to your SDI plans for the student? Maybe you need to go back and say, do they need a goal, or do I need to make sure, even if they don't have a goal, how can I help them focus on these areas to make sure that they have full access, right? When we look at attending to access, if you look here on this chart or on this slide, it's got, different kinds of access, whether it's grade level text, communication, organization, you'll see all of these different things, right? Self-advocacy is always a big one. And then on the right, we've got executive functioning skills. And so we're going to go just a little deeper into that and as we go through this presentation today. But there's many different examples in the book as well. But today I want to talk to you just a little bit about when kids have executive functioning deficits. This is I love this little visual. This was on a SMART executive function program site. And I love this because I feel like when we think about struggling with executive function, it actually makes even our simplest tasks feel impossible, right? Not even just from lack of effort, but because your cognitive processes aren't engaging as needed. You know what you can do but you just can't get started. Have you ever had that happen to you? This is definitely going to lead to like extra frustration and self-doubt. And so it just makes it worse. It just compiles on there, right? So recognizing this challenge is key to offering support and finding strategies that bridge the gap between intention and action, right? I mean, we see executive functioning deficits in pre-K. Do we see it all the way up and even into adulthood? How many people don't call anybody out, don't put names in, but do you know anyone who is an adult with some executive function deficits? It's, I think, these are something that are learned. We are not born with executive functioning skills. There's things that need to be taught. And there's so many different things. And this is why we talk very heavily about making sure that we are teaching these executive functioning skills in our preschools at home, right? We want these things to be taught because the more kids come with those experiences, the better they are able to be a student. I can't even tell you how many times I've spoken with kindergarten teachers, and they say, man, if our preschool teachers could just teach them executive functioning skills, how to be a student, I can do the rest. That's my job. And so I think, of course, preschool is going to do more than just that. But I think that's how important it is, right? That we have those foundational skills so that we can learn, we can pay attention, we can be flexible. This is just a cute little video that I'm going to show you really quickly about being flexible. And so think about this, not just from your students' perspective, but your own perspective as an adult. Sometimes we all need to remember this.
Imagine holding a piece of spaghetti right between your fingertips. Give it a smack with the other hand. Easy to break, right? Now, imagine holding a piece of cooked spaghetti from your fingertips. Hit that thing all you want. It just flops around, it doesn't break. You see, a cooked spaghetti noodle can withstand quite a bit of disturbance because it's so flexible. It just hangs loose and takes the bumps. Now, let's bring this analogy back to us. In our work, our school, our creativity even, we can take more bumps when we simply hang loose, when we learn to become more flexible. So, if you don't want to break, you've got to bend. Now, we can't expect to be controlling every circumstance or situation that we're in, but we can learn to be more flexible. And this flexibility, man, it's a superpower. Our flexibility in our thinking and our doing will allow us to approach problems in different ways. It allows us to shift, to sway into new ideas, to change, to adapt as we continue towards our goals. So, if your noodle's cooking on a problem, that's a great thing. Just be willing to bend your thinking, become flexible. This is the most essential skill you can build. So, how will you use the superpower of flexibility in your life today?
All right, I know that video is really outdated. You could definitely see the signs of the times. However, I hope that the message came through. So we can see here, these are some different executive functioning skills for success. We know that planning is a big piece of that. Organization, task initiation, you can read them all here. But, each one of these plays a role in how well we are able to be successful at learning. So from pre-K, actually from even toddler to newborn to toddler, we're learning these things along the way. And so you can see that each one of these pieces would play a big role in how well we're going to and how successful we're going to be. These are just reasons to teach. You can see here their life skills, they build independence. I love that, it really does. We are literally, again, if we're looking to build those skills to where they can, continue to move these things along as we go and help them to build on these skills, we have to look at all of these pieces and why it's so important. Sometimes some of the things that I've done, just some fun different ideas that we can do, like when we talk about inhibitory control, and being able to just, take control of our impulses. When we look at that, some of those things, all the board games we play, think about that. How does that help to build our skills for inhibitory control? Simon Says, freeze dance, red light, green light. A lot of these things we did as kids, and yet now our kids are doing so many more video games, and they're not doing these kind of things together. And so can we put some of those things into our plans to help them and help teach them those kind of skills in a fun way? And so, go ahead, play Simon Says and see which ones. You'll know really quickly what kids have inhibitory control deficits. So some of those strategies for supporting executive functioning needs, we need to explicitly teach and reinforce those skills. Do they have student binders? Are we making sure that they have a way to organize? List those items in the same area, right? Like, make sure we're giving them time to practice these skills. That is something that's really, really important. A lot of times I had kids when I taught in junior high, there were kids that, and some of it was just their home situation, going back and forth between mom and dad, we would give them an extra book to take home so that they could have it at different places, because it's a lot sometimes. And we forget that these kids are going through a lot in their lives as well. Not just, it's not just us. They're going through a lot of traumatic things sometimes. And so, we need to make sure that we're helping to set them up for success. And then this number 7 is building in specific methods to boost participation. That engagement piece, I don't think I have to tell you. We talked a little bit about that last time, that how important it is that our students are engaged. But how engaged are we, right? How engaged are we? And then how much are we ensuring that that we are, we're pulling our students in instead of pushing them out, right? What kind of things do we do? How can we group them differently? What strategies, what tools can we help them to be successful? Again, here we go back to that skill acquisition and performance deficit, right? Remembering that we need to make sure why a student might not be performing, right? Why they might not want to do it. And sometimes, you think about it, how many times have you been sitting in a lecture in college. And I mean, there are some of those professors who are just so engaging, you can't keep your eyes off, and your ears, you can't shut your ears off because you just want to know more, right? And then you have someone who literally there's nothing you can do to keep yourself from falling asleep because it's so boring, right? Which ones are we in the classroom? Are we making it to where our kids don't want to be there? Are we making it to where it's so boring they just, they're tuning out? What are we doing to make it more engaging, more fun? Learning should be fun, right? Not just in kindergarten, not just in, the elementary grades. What are we doing to make it fun? I think about that scene in the Dead Poets Society. If you guys ever saw that, Robin Williams jumps up on the table. I'm not telling you to jump up on the table, but I'm just saying, like, we have to change things up sometimes. We have a program right now for our preschool. Amy Reyes from the department is doing a lot of this, and it's getting outside to promote some of that learning. How often have we changed it up for our kids to where it's made it more exciting and more engaging? So this quote, while many variables affect participation engagement, there's one constant. When it drops, so does learning, right? That is a definite. If you turn to these pages from 116, 117, and those guiding questions, those engagement boosters, I'll give you just a second. Where are we at for time? We have a little bit of time. So if you look at 116, I actually really love that piece. There's ones on emotion, right? How are they going to feel? How are they going to feel accepted? We know that relationships play a huge role in that. What about interest? I can tell you this. When math was not as easy for me when I got into the upper grades, and I had one teacher, my first algebra teacher, literally would instruct as she wrote on the board. And as quickly as she'd write it on the board, as soon as she'd start erasing and writing more. And, she just talked in a monotone voice. I'm going to tell you, I did not learn that year in algebra, and I did not do so well. And that really bugged me because my grades mattered to me. The next year, the teacher I had for algebra in Algebra 2 was so engaging. I ended up really enjoying algebra and really doing well. I mean, what was the difference there? I think that I don't think we realize the impact we can have just by making sure that we're making it engaging. We're making all of this instruction engaging. The importance, kids want to know why they're learning, just like we want to know why we are having to do something, right? And then efficacy. Again, going back to that, as we talked before, there is a huge effect size when kids feel like they can do something and they're believed in and they can believe in themselves. But that effect size is that, remember, it was the same when they knew their teacher believed in them, right? And so I think we have to just keep those things in mind. So when we talk about making learning fun, what are some ways that what are some fun, creative ideas that you've done to make learning fun? Just pop some of your ideas in that Q&A. And of course, I'm not talking about just sitting there playing, just board games for nothing. I'm talking about making it intentional, making it purposeful. Community-based learning,
So,
yes.
We're seeing community-based learning, Kahoots, Kagan structures.
Yeah. If you've never
using
Kagan, I went through
using
the Kagan.
songs to memorize.
Yeah. Hands-on. When you can put kinesthetic learning alongside any kind of lesson, it is going to help it stick for sure.
Connecting to their interests, which is great.
I love it. Cook for math in the measurement unit. Yes.
Board games, real life objects and experiences.
Yeah. You know, when I was teaching at the junior high, I think some of you may have already heard this story, but we were in the, we were in the part where they needed to write a report. And learn how to cite, research and different things like that. And we had, of course, this whole part in our curriculum. Well, one day, as I was reading to the kids, all of a sudden we had this. I was blessed enough to sit or to have my classroom the end, and there were these huge windows that went, across two different areas in our room. And one day, as we're sitting there, we heard this huge just crash, and it sounded like something hit our window, and it sounded like it broke it, but it didn't. And of course, the kids were all like, "Oh my goodness, what is that?" We go running over to the window to see what had happened, and we see that a bird had hit our window, and it was down on the ground, and it was a large bird. We did not know. None of us really knew what kind of bird this was, but it was pretty large. And we had these crows up on you could see them up in the top of the school, and they were dive bombing this bird. And so we came to the conclusion that that's probably what made this bird hit our window, is that these crows were chasing it, and and it had hit our window, and so we thought it had killed the bird. And then we could see a little bit of movement, and so of course the kids, we ended up, long story short, we ended up going out, and we had the principal and the janitor help us. They found a box, they covered the bird so that these crows couldn't kill it. And Game and Fish came, picked up this bird, and we learned that it was a sharp-shinned hawk. And the Game and Fish were so wonderful. They sent us pictures of, they ended up helping fix the bird's wing and, returned him back to the wild. We got video of that. We got pictures of this bird along the way. Well, I turned this into, instead of a report on just anything, we decided to do a report on, they could do any bird in Wyoming, but they had to make a PowerPoint and, cite their sources, do all this. How excited do you think they were to present their report to the class? It was probably the best reports I had seen, and they were so invested. Not only none of us knew that there was such thing as a sharp-shinned hawk. I do now because of that experience. But we can just literally take some of that kind of, when we have things come up like that, turn it into those learning experiences for your kids. It can be so exciting. Well, it looks like we are right at time. So I do want to just talk about what's next. Again, March 18th from 4 to 5 will be our final section, part 3. This one is fulfilling the promise of SDI, or in other words, the delivery of SDI, right? And then there's the dates of our makeup meetings. Again, it will be at the same time from that 4 to 5 o'clock. And again, I want to just tell you thank you. I know it's a long day for you, and I love that you guys are so willing to be, to participate and to be excited about this. And I hope that you are enjoying the book as much as I do. I think it's just a great practical book for teachers. For today's attendance, here is a QR code, and I am going to, let me find my chat. I have it ready to go. So there is the form for you. If you can make sure that you fill this out if you're wanting credit, or if you're just wanting a certificate of attendance. This helps Jennifer Duncan, our administrative assistant, to just keep track of sending these out. And so make sure that you're getting your attendance documented, and because that's going to help to make sure that you do get your PTSB or your STARS credit. If you're just needing a certificate of attendance for your district, knowing that you're here today, that can also happen. That's on that form as well. So again, thank you so much. And I hope you have a wonderful evening. It still feels like a nice spring day out in Wyoming. It's supposed to get colder, so get outside before it gets crazy. And I will.
Dina, do we have time for any questions or
Yeah.
comments?
If you need to go, it's 5:01. So if you need to go ahead and jump off. But if you have a question, yeah, I'll hang on for a little bit.
Can we unmute or will they go to the Q&A?
If you'll put it in the
They can
Q&A,
unmute now?
put it in the Q&A. I see one person.
Yeah, I'm getting messages. The link is not loading, the attendance link. I tried also to scan it and it went nowhere.
Really?
Maybe let's try the link in the chat.
Yeah, try the link in the chat. You know, we had a couple of people were not able to use it last time. And so I sent it out in the follow-up email. And so I'll do that again in case, but try the link in the chat and see if that will work.
Oh, but can they see the chat? Or
they can access the
just
chat, they just can't put any chat. Yeah.
Okay. Link is not loading. Nope, nope, nope. So that link is not functional. We will, what will we do?
I will put it in the I'll put it in the follow-up email so that you can have that. Did you try the link in the chat, Gail?
Yes, I did. It's kind of doing the same thing, which is nothing.
Huh. Yeah, mine is just spinning. I don't know if maybe we're just having a bad bandwidth or if it's truly not working. So try it again a little later. Let's see.
But we do have the means to email everybody, right? We do a follow-up to everybody that was here.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we have the registration. Sure. Okay. Sorry about that, people.
Yeah. Yeah, mine is just spinning as well, but it's just not even open. So hopefully it's just some sort of a bandwidth, and maybe try again a little later.
Yeah.
So I see somebody said the makeup day is spring break. So that's why I did it 2 different days, the 20th and the 25th. So hopefully you can make one of those days. Oh, somebody said they were able to complete the form from the chat link.
Well, let's try that again.
But mine is still spinning as well. So I'm not sure what's going on.
Yeah.
And if I go from the link straight on the slide. Yeah, it's just spinning. Well, I apologize for that. Maybe try again in just a little bit. I will, when I close out the meeting, I'll go in there and see if there's something. But if somebody was able to get in, then it's working. It's just maybe not, something's not going on here for everyone.